My mother demanded I legally change my name to Brandon so her dead son could live again through me. When I finally asked her why I had to suffer for a brother I never met, she slapped me and said, "Because you're the one who lived." I just stared at her. That was 11 months ago. This morning, she was crying so quietly in group therapy that I almost didn't recognize her voice. I wake up to darkness every morning at 4:55 a.m., 5 minutes before my personal apocalypse begins. My mother requires me to cry with her for exactly 1 hour every morning at 5 a.m. to mourn my brother who died before I was born. Let that sink in. I'm forced to grieve someone I've never met every single day, like some kind of emotional vampire feeding my mother's endless hunger for sorrow. The alarm doesn't need to ring anymore. My body has adapted to this torture schedule like a prisoner of war, learning to wake before the guards arrive. I slip out of bed and trudge to what she calls the remembrance room, but what I've secretly named the Chamber of Perpetual Sadness. The walls are plastered with photos of Brandon, the golden child who had the audacity to die at age 4 and leave me to deal with the aftermath 16 years later. Katrina, I stopped calling her mom when she stopped being one, sits in the center like a grief-stricken Buddha, surrounded by candles that probably violate every fire code in existence. Her eyes scan my face with the intensity of a TSA agent looking for the contraband happiness. Not enough tears means having to start over. Too many tears means I'm faking. There's a sweet spot of misery I've learned to hit like a dart player aiming for the triple 20. The rules evolved over time like some twisted Pokemon of emotional manipulation. First, it was just the morning crying. Then came the daily letters to dead Brandon, which I have to write in cursive because apparently ghosts are picky about penmanship. During his death anniversary month, all 31 days of October, I wear all black mourning clothes that smell like mothballs and broken dreams. She monitors my face during school pickup, checking for any signs I might have accidentally experienced joy during algebra. Then the breaking point came like a freight train made of pure insanity. She demanded I legally change my name to Brandon, not as a middle name, not as a nickname. She wanted to literally erase me and replace me with her ghost son. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. The slap that followed made it clear that humor had died in our house along with Brandon. Mrs. Jennings, our neighbor, acted the next morning. She saw an opportunity in the bruising across my cheek. 3 years of documentation she'd been keeping. 3 years of watching me show up to school looking like an extra from a zombie movie. When I finally broke down in her office, the words poured out like water from a broken dam. She didn't just call CPS, she personally drove me to the station and sat with me through 4 hours of questions. The investigation moved slower than a sloth in a tar pit. Multiple home visits where Katrina performed grief like she was auditioning for a tragedy at the Globe Theater. But they placed me with my dad's parents, people I barely knew but who had something revolutionary in their house. Clocks that didn't dictate when to cry. That first night, I slept until 7 a.m. 7 a.m. It felt like winning the emotional lottery. But Katrina wasn't done. She showed up at school, wailing about kidnapping loud enough to set off car alarms. She filed so many false reports against my grandparents that CPS probably had a special filing cabinet just for her fiction. She convinced half our relatives that I was mentally ill, probably bipolar, definitely lying. Her crown jewel was a psychological evaluation from a doctor that claimed I was a sociopath and dangerously unstable. The night she broke into my grandparents' house changed everything. I woke up to her standing over my bed like some grief-powered sleep paralysis demon, whispering about how Brandon would never abandon her. When I screamed, my grandfather, a 70-year-old man who hadn't run since the Clinton administration, suddenly found Olympic speeds getting to my room. The court case was a circus where Katrina was both the ringmaster and the dancing bear. She sobbed about losing both children, conveniently forgetting she'd never actually lost me. She'd thrown me away like expired milk, but my recordings finally got admitted as evidence. Months of 5 a.m. hysteria, all digitally preserved like the world's most depressing podcast. The judge ordered her into mandatory psychiatric treatment. I won emancipation at 17, got a studio apartment that's roughly the size of a generous closet, and work nights at a warehouse to pay rent. Half my family thinks I'm the devil, the other half pretends I don't exist. But every morning, I wake up whenever my body decides to wake up, and that freedom tastes better than any family dinner ever did. At 18, I was just starting to learn what normal felt like. Therapy was helping, though my therapist's eyes went wider than dinner plates when I explained my morning routine. I still can't hear the name Brandon without flinching, like someone's about to throw something. Then the doorbell rang. A girl, maybe 13, standing there with eyes I recognized, that haunted look of someone living in someone else's grief. She said, "Are you Sean? I'm your half-sister. Mom's making me do the morning crying. Please help me." I stared at Maya, my mind racing through calculations faster than a warehouse inventory scanner. 3 months at this job, still on probation, already used 2 sick days for therapy appointments. My supervisor made it clear, 1 more absence, and I'd be updating my resume. Maya shifted her weight from foot to foot, that same nervous dance I used to do when waiting for Katrina's verdict on whether my tears were authentic enough. Her backpack hung heavy on her shoulders, probably stuffed with whatever she could grab before escaping. I noticed the careful way she held her left arm against her body. I stepped aside, and she practically fell through my doorway. The studio apartment suddenly felt even smaller with 2 people who'd survived the same war. She dropped her backpack by the door and stood there, looking lost. I grabbed a glass from the dish rack and filled it with water, my hands trembling slightly as I handed it to her. She took small sips while I tried to process what this meant. Maya existing wasn't news. Katrina had mentioned her new family occasionally during supervised visits before I cut contact completely. But seeing her here, seeing myself reflected in her exhausted eyes, made it real in a way that knocked the air from my lungs. I pulled out my phone to check the time. 11:47 p.m. My shift started at midnight. Rodriguez had already called out sick twice this week, which meant they'd definitely need coverage. Time and a half would mean an extra $120, enough to cover the electricity bill that was already stamped with a red final notice. Maya sat on my secondhand couch, still clutching the water glass. I grabbed the instant coffee from the cabinet, needing something to do with my hands while my brain tried to sort through options. The coffee maker sputtered to life, filling the silence with familiar mechanical sounds. She started talking without prompting, words spilling out in that way trauma does when it finally finds a safe audience. The morning routine had evolved since my time. Now she had to write letters from Brandon's perspective, telling herself what a disappointment she was. The cursive requirement remained, because apparently even self-hatred needed proper penmanship. My phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor asking if I could cover Rodriguez's shift, time and a half, just like I'd predicted. I stared at the message while Maya unconsciously rubbed her cheek. In the overhead light, I could see the shadow of a bruise forming along her jawline. I set the phone aside and grabbed the cordless from its cradle. CPS had a 24-hour hotline. I'd memorized it years ago, just in case. But when the intake worker answered, my carefully planned speech dissolved into stuttering rage. The crying room, the forced letters, the way Katrina had found a new victim when I escaped. The worker kept asking me to slow down, to explain more clearly. But how do you explain systematic emotional torture to someone who's probably heard a dozen calls tonight about kids with broken bones and empty refrigerators? How do you make them understand that forced grief can break a person just as thoroughly as fists? Maya watched me pace the narrow strip between my bed and the kitchen counter. When I finally hung up, promising to bring her to the office first thing in the morning, she looked even smaller than before. My phone buzzed again. This time, the message was more urgent. Rodriguez definitely wasn't coming in. They needed an answer now. I looked at the phone, then at Maya, who flinched when I moved too quickly. That flinch told me everything I needed to know about what sudden movements meant in Katrina's house. I typed out my response with steady fingers. Can't make it tonight. Sick. The lie came easily. 3 months of perfect attendance gone. My supervisor's response was immediate and curt. I'd need a doctor's note. We'd discuss this tomorrow. Maya needed food. Her stomach had been growling since she arrived, though she probably didn't realize it. Trauma had a way of making you forget your body had needs. I checked my wallet. $23 until Friday. The 7-Eleven 2 blocks away would be open. We walked in silence, Maya staying close enough that I could feel her anxiety radiating like heat. The fluorescent lights of the store made her bruise look worse. I grabbed milk, cereal, and a pre-made sandwich, doing mental math with each item. That's when I saw Janet behind the counter. Our cousin, Katrina's sister's daughter. My stomach dropped as recognition flashed across her face. She rang up our items without speaking, but I could see her fingers moving across her phone screen the moment we turned away. By the time we got back to my apartment, my phone was exploding with notifications. The family group chat I'd muted but never left. Janet's message was at the top. Just saw Sean at 7-Eleven with some young girl. I wonder what's really going through Sean's mind right now with Maya showing up at his door asking for help. The timing feels strange. He's barely making rent, just lost his job calling in sick, and suddenly he has to deal with this whole situation. Thought you should know, Aunt Cat. The responses came fast. Concern, alarm, accusations. Someone had already screenshotted my apartment complex from Google Maps. Another cousin offered to drive by and check things out. The speed of their mobilization would have been impressive if it wasn't terrifying. Maya ate the sandwich in small, careful bites while I watched the digital lynch mob form in real time. Then Katrina's first post appeared on Facebook. Not in the family chat. She went straight to public theater. My baby girl is missing. Maya left for school this morning and never came home. I'm terrified. Her unstable half-brother has made threats before. Please share this post. Every minute counts when a child is missing. The share count climbed rapidly. 50, 100, 200. Someone had already commented with my address, pulled from some old family email. Another person posted a photo of me from last Christmas before I'd cut contact completely. In it, I looked tired and thin, easy to paint as unstable. My phone rang. Katrina's number. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again immediately, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. Her voice was pure performance, pitched loud enough for whoever was surely listening. Sobs mixed with accusations. How could I do this? Maya was sick, needed her medications. Did I even know about her anxiety disorder? Her therapy appointments? How could I be so selfish? I hung up. Maya had stopped eating, the sandwich half finished in her lap. She looked at me with those haunted eyes and said something that made my blood run cold. She's not always bad. Sometimes she buys me things. Sometimes we have normal days. The classic abuse victim's defense. I recognized it because I'd said the same things once. The good days made the bad ones feel like your fault. Maybe if you were better, every day could be good. Maya reached for her backpack and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were documents I recognized, the kind Katrina kept in what she called the memorial files. Brandon's birth certificate, his death certificate, photos from his funeral, and there, paperclip to the death certificate, a note in Katrina's handwriting. Practice copying this in cursive. You need to understand the weight of loss. I photographed everything with my phone, hands shaking as I read the cause of death, accidental drowning. But Maya mentioned something about the crying pool story that made me look up sharply. She tells it different ways, Maya explained. Sometimes he wandered off. Sometimes she was distracted. Sometimes she trailed off, rubbing that bruise again. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from my landlord. Rent was due tomorrow. He'd been patient last month when I was 2 days late, but patience had limits. $800 I definitely didn't have if I wasn't working tonight's shift. Then my grandfather called. His voice sounded tired, older than his 70 years. Katrina had been calling them again, showing up at their church, telling anyone who'd listen about their kidnapping of me years ago. Now she was warning them they'd they'd better not be hiding Maya. 3 crises at once, each demanding immediate attention. Maya needed clothes. She'd only packed what fit in her school backpack. My job was probably gone. Rent was due. And somewhere across town, Katrina was building her narrative of the concerned mother with the unstable son who'd stolen her baby. A knock at the door made us both freeze. Maya's eyes went wide with panic. I looked through the peephole to see my neighbor from 2B, an older woman who'd always been friendly. Her face was creased with concern. I opened the door a crack. She glanced past me, definitely saw Maya, then looked back at me with something like fear in her eyes. Is everything okay? I saw on Facebook there's a missing girl. I closed the door. The apartment complex had security cameras in the hallways. By now, someone had probably already called 911 about the strange man with the young girl. The story was writing itself. Maya had started to shake, not crying. Katrina had probably trained that out of her the same way she'd tried with me, just shaking, like her body was trying to process too much at once. I remembered that feeling. Your nervous system overloading from constantly scanning for danger. My phone showed 47 unread messages. Katrina's Facebook post had been shared over 300 times. Someone had started a Find Maya group that already had dozens of members. The comment sections were full of people I'd never met discussing my mental health, my history, my fitness to be around children. I scrolled through, screenshotting the worst comments for potential evidence. That's when I saw it, buried in one thread, someone mentioning how I'd been flagged before for kidnapping claims. My history with CPS twisted into something sinister. The truth was already drowning in Katrina's flood of manufactured panic. But I had Maya here, safe for now. I had evidence. I had the truth. I just wasn't sure if that would be enough. The pounding on my door started at 2:47 a.m. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that rattles the cheap apartment walls and makes the neighbors peek through their peepholes. Maya pressed herself into the corner of my couch, making herself smaller with each impact. I recognized the rhythm. Katrina had found us. I grabbed my phone and started recording before approaching the door. Through the peephole, I saw 2 uniformed officers flanking Katrina, who clutched a tissue to her face, while her shoulders heaved with theatrical sobs. The officers looked uncomfortable but determined. Opening the door just enough to show my face, I kept the chain on. The younger officer stepped forward, explaining they'd received reports of a missing child, possibly at this location. Katrina wailed louder, reaching past them toward my door. I held up my phone, making sure they saw I was recording, and calmly explained Maya had come to me for help. The older officer asked to see Maya. I glanced back at her terrified face, then unhooked the chain. They entered my studio, taking in the sparse furnishings, and Maya huddled on the couch. Katrina rushed toward her, but the younger officer held her back, suggesting everyone remain calm. Maya's whole body trembled as the officers asked if she was okay. She nodded but couldn't speak. I showed them the photos I'd taken of her bruise, the death certificate she'd been forced to carry, the cursive copying assignments. The younger officer examined everything while the older one kept Katrina from interfering. Katrina's performance escalated. She clutched her chest, gasping about her heart condition. A new development since my time. She swayed dramatically, forcing the older officer to steady her. Between sobs, she insisted Maya needed her anxiety medication, her special diet, her therapy appointments. All things only a loving mother would remember. The officers exchanged glances. Without a custody order, they explained, Maya would need to return home. My documentation meant nothing without proper legal channels. I watched Maya shrink further into herself as they explained she could file a report tomorrow, but tonight she had to go with her mother. I tried explaining about the morning crying rituals, but Katrina interrupted with confusion so perfectly crafted it made me sound delusional. Morning prayers, she corrected gently. They said morning prayers for Brandon. Was that really so terrible? The officer's expressions shifted. I was losing. Maya finally found her voice, small and shaky. She asked if she could pack some things from my apartment first. The officers agreed, following us inside while Katrina waited in the hallway. As Maya gathered her backpack, she pressed something into my hand, her phone, unlocked. I slipped it into my pocket. The walk to the door felt endless. Maya moved like she was heading to an execution. At the threshold, she turned back to look at me, and I saw myself at 13, being returned to Katrina after my first escape attempt. History repeating in the worst way. After they left, I sat in my empty apartment staring at Maya's phone. The screen showed dozens of photos, screenshots, videos. She'd been building her own evidence file for months. Videos of Katrina's 5 a.m. meltdowns, photos of the memorial room's newest additions, screenshots of text messages demanding she channel Brandon's spirit during family gatherings. My supervisor called at 6 a.m., officially terminating my employment. No show without proper documentation meant immediate dismissal. I'd have to return my uniform and badge by end of business day. The timing felt deliberately cruel. I spent the morning organizing Maya's evidence, uploading everything to multiple cloud services. The videos were damning. Katrina forcing Maya to kiss Brandon's photograph goodnight, making her wear his hospital bracelet during the crying sessions. The worst was a recording of Katrina explaining how Brandon lived through Maya now. Around 10 a.m., I noticed something strange in Katrina's Facebook posts. Between the missing child alerts, she'd shared a memory from 2 years ago, a photo of her with a man at what looked like a recovery meeting. The caption mentioned gratitude for fellowship and understanding. I recognized the room, same NA meeting I'd attended. I zoomed in on the man's face, Marcus. He'd been in my Thursday night group, always talked about redemption and making amends. Something cold settled in my stomach as I remembered his stories, the details he'd shared, details about me, thinking he was in a safe space. The knock at my door was softer this time. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in business attire holding a clipboard. CPS, she announced. Follow-up visit regarding last night's incident. I let her in, hope flickering. She sat at my small table, pulling out forms. terms. Her questions were routine at first. My relationship to Maya, how long she'd been here, why she'd come to me. There's something really strange about Katrina knowing exactly where to find them at 2:47 a.m. How did she track them down so quickly? Then they shifted. Did I have a history of mental health issues? Had I ever made threats against my mother? Why had I been checking Katrina's social media so frequently? I realized too late what was happening. This wasn't a follow-up about Maya's safety. This was an investigation into me. Every answer I gave seemed to confirm some predetermined narrative. Yes, I'd been in therapy. Yes, I'd had conflicts with Katrina. Yes, I'd been monitoring her public posts. The worker took notes without looking up, occasionally making sympathetic noises that felt rehearsed. When she asked about my employment status, I had to admit I'd just lost my job. Her pen moved faster. She left after an hour, promising someone would be in touch. The card she handed me wasn't for CPS's main office, but for their Adult Protective Services division. They were investigating whether I posed a threat. I drove to the warehouse to return my uniform, Maya's phone hidden in my glove compartment. The security guard, usually friendly, barely made eye contact. In the break room, conversations stopped when I entered. Someone had seen the Facebook posts. The narrative was spreading. My replacement was already training, I noticed. Katrina's neighbor's son, though I didn't make the connection until later. He wore my badge number, worked my station. The speed of it felt deliberate, orchestrated. Back in my car, I scrolled through more of Maya's evidence. One video made me pull over. Katrina filming herself crying at Brandon's grave, but in the background, barely visible, Maya stood apart, checking her phone. The timestamp showed 5:17 a.m. They'd gone to the cemetery for their morning ritual. That's when I noticed Marcus, in another video, sitting at Katrina's kitchen table, helping Maya with homework. The date was 3 weeks ago. He'd been in her house, around Maya, while still attending meetings where I shared my story. The betrayal felt like acid in my throat. My grandfather called while I sat in the parking lot. His voice sounded strained. Katrina had filed a complaint with Elder Services, claiming he and my grandmother were being manipulated by their mentally unstable grandson. Someone would be visiting them tomorrow. The pattern was clear now. Every support system I had was being systematically targeted. My job, gone. My grandparents, under investigation. CPS, turned against me. Even my NA meeting felt tainted now, knowing Marcus had been feeding information back to Katrina. I drove past Maya's school during lunch period. Through the fence, I spotted her sitting alone on a bench, that same hollow look I'd worn for years. Other kids gave her wide berth. The missing child drama had marked her as different, damaged. That afternoon, I met with a family lawyer who'd agreed to a consultation. She reviewed Maya's evidence with professional detachment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. The videos were compelling, she admitted, but family court favored biological parents. Without physical abuse, emotional torture was harder to prove. The retainer she quoted might as well have been $1 million. $5,000 just to start. Court costs, filing fees, expert witnesses. It would add up fast. I had $900 in savings and no job. The math was impossible. She suggested I focus on supporting Maya through proper channels instead. Be available when she turned 18. Document everything, but don't interfere. It was practical advice that felt like abandonment. Leaving her office, I found Marcus waiting by my car. He leaned against the driver's door, blocking my escape. Up close, I could see the calculation in his eyes. Nothing like the broken man seeking redemption in our meetings. He explained calmly that Katrina needed support too. She'd lost one child, couldn't lose another. Did I understand what my actions were doing to her? The way he said it, like we were discussing weather, made my skin crawl. I tried to move past him, but he shifted, still blocking the door. His recovery story had been about making amends to an ex-wife, I remembered, learning to respect boundaries. The irony wasn't lost as he invaded my space, using his body to intimidate. When he finally moved, he mentioned casually that Katrina was considering pressing charges: kidnapping, custodial interference, stalking. The words dropped like bombs. He suggested I think carefully about my next moves. That night, I sat in my dark apartment researching legal definitions on my phone. The stalking charge could stick. I had been monitoring her social media, even if just to check on Maya. The kidnapping was harder to prove, but would destroy me regardless. Even an accusation would follow me forever. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo of Maya at the dinner table, head bowed, Katrina's hand on her shoulder. The message read, "She's safe at home where she belongs." I recognized the kitchen, the same table where I'd been forced to write my letters to Brandon, the same overhead light that cast shadows, making everyone look hollow. Maya wore long sleeves despite the warm evening, covering bruises or just broken spirit. I couldn't tell. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maya's face as they led her away. The resignation, the defeat. I'd promised to help her and failed within hours, just like everyone had failed me until Mrs. Jennings finally acted. At 4:55 a.m., my body woke automatically. Old programming died hard. I lay in the dark, wondering if Maya was trudging to the memorial room right now, if Katrina was lighting candles, preparing for their morning performance, if Maya was learning to cry on command like I had. The unemployment office opened at 8 a.m. I arrived at 7:45 to find a line already forming. The fluorescent lights inside made everyone look sick. I filled out forms, provided documentation, explained my termination. The clerk processed everything with robotic efficiency. Benefits would take 2 weeks to start, if approved. The amount would barely cover rent, nothing left for food or lawyers. I'd need to show proof of job searching, attend mandatory workshops. The system designed to help felt like another trap closing. Walking back to my car, I noticed a familiar face in the coffee shop across the street. My old coworker, Destiny, sat alone at a corner table. She saw me through the window and quickly looked away. The friend who'd promised support was now pretending I didn't exist. I understood. She had kids, a life to protect. Getting involved in my drama meant risking Katrina's attention. The smart choice was distance. It still stung watching her gather her things and leave through the back exit. My phone rang. Maya's school counselor, voice carefully neutral. She was calling about Maya's medication refills. The prescription needed parental authorization, and there seemed to be some confusion about the situation. Was I listed as an emergency contact? I explained I was Maya's half-brother, that she'd come to me for help. The counselor's tone shifted, becoming more guarded. She'd need to speak with Maya's mother about any concerns. School policy. She ended the call before I could say more. Another door closing. Maya's anxiety medication would run out in days without refills. Katrina now had complete control over her mental health treatment. The leverage was perfect. Comply with morning crying or lose access to the medication that kept panic attacks at bay. I drove aimlessly, trying to think. Every move I made seemed to tighten Katrina's grip. Fighting back gave her ammunition. Doing nothing meant abandoning Maya. The game was rigged. Had always been rigged. Parking at a strip mall, I noticed the pharmacy where Maya's prescriptions were filled. Through the window, I could see the pharmacist I'd gotten to know during my own time in Katrina's house. She'd always been kind, asking subtle questions about my well-being. Inside, I pretended to browse while working up courage. When I finally approached the counter, she recognized me immediately. Her expression softened with concern. I asked vaguely about prescription policies, fishing for information about Maya's medications. She couldn't share specifics, privacy laws, but mentioned seeing Katrina at multiple pharmacies lately. The observation was careful, professional, but I caught the implication. Doctor shopping, looking for someone who'd prescribe what others wouldn't. Back in my car, I added this to my mental evidence file. Katrina seeking multiple prescriptions suggested either her own medication needs or something darker. Was she sedating Maya? The thought made me sick. My grandfather called again. The elder services visit had gone poorly. The investigator seemed predisposed to find problems, asking leading questions about my influence. Did I pressure them financially? Had I made threats? Were they afraid of me? He sounded defeated in a way that broke my heart. 73 years old, just wanting peace, now dealing with investigations because he'd helped his grandson. He mentioned, carefully, that it might be better if I kept some distance for a while. Another support gone. Katrina was systematically isolating me, using the system designed to protect families to destroy mine. Every agency meant to help had been turned into a weapon against me. That evening, I sat with Maya's phone, reviewing more evidence. One screenshot showed a text exchange with a friend from school. Maya explaining she couldn't hang out because of family obligations. The friend's response suggested this was common. Maya always having to cancel plans for Brandon-related activities. The isolation was intentional. Keep Maya from forming outside connections. Make the morning crying and memorial visits her only constant. I recognized the pattern because I'd lived it. By the time Mrs. Jennings intervened, I'd had no real friends left. Another video, this one showing Katrina teaching Maya to channel Brandon's voice for the letters. Katrina teaching Maya to channel Brandon's voice for letters? That detail makes me question just how deep this psychological control really goes. The way she's turned every system against him, CPS, elder services, even his job. There's something calculated here that feels bigger than just grief. Katrina's coaching was specific. Brandon would be disappointed in Maya's grades, her attitude, her failure to properly grieve. Maya's face remained blank as she wrote, dissociating from the emotional abuse. I started typing everything into a document. Dates, times, evidence references, building the case I couldn't afford to file. Maybe someday, when Maya was older, it would matter. For now, it felt like screaming into the void. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number, another photo. This one showed Maya at what looked like a therapy appointment, Katrina beside her. The message read, getting the help she needs. But I recognized the office. Not Maya's regular therapist, but someone new. Someone who'd likely hear Katrina's version first, establishing the narrative before Maya could speak. The therapeutic relationship poisoned from the start. At 11 p.m., exhaustion finally won. I collapsed on my couch, still in my clothes. Tomorrow I'd need to job hunt, fight the unemployment claim my former employer would probably contest, figure out how to pay rent. But tonight, I just needed to stop thinking. The dream came like it always did. Brandon's photos talking, asking why I couldn't save Maya. Katrina's voice echoing about family obligations. Maya getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared entirely. I woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. 3:33 a.m. The clock mocked me with its symmetry. In 90 minutes, Maya would be waking up, starting another day of forced grief. And I was powerless to stop it, just like everyone had been powerless to stop it for me. Except that wasn't true. Mrs. Jennings had acted. It took 3 years, but she'd collected evidence, made reports, refused to give up. Maybe I couldn't save Maya today, but I could be her Mrs. Jennings. Play the long game. I opened a new document on my phone, started typing everything I remembered about Katrina's patterns, the escalation timeline, how the rules evolved, what warning signs I'd missed. If I couldn't fight her now, I could at least prepare for when I could. The sun rose slowly, painting my apartment in pale light. Somewhere across town, Maya was probably finishing her morning cry, washing her face, preparing for school where she'd pretend everything was normal, just like I had. But she'd left me her phone, her evidence. She was fighting in her own way, documenting the truth even when speaking it was impossible. That took courage I hadn't had at her age. Maybe there was hope after all. My laptop chimed with a new email, a job listing, overnight security at an office building. The pay was less than the warehouse, but they needed someone immediately. No experience required. I sent my application before I could overthink it. Another email, this one from a legal aid organization. They couldn't take my case but provided resources for self-representation, forms, filing procedures, court protocols. It wasn't much, but it was something, a thread to pull when I was ready. The day stretched ahead, full of small battles to fight. Each one felt insignificant alone, but together they might matter. Mrs. Jennings Jennings hadn't saved me in a day. She'd built a case over years, waiting for the right moment. I could do that for Maya. Document everything. Stay visible, but not threatening. Be the stable presence she could turn to when ready. Play by the system's rules while collecting evidence of how broken that system was. The game was rigged, but that didn't mean it couldn't be won. It just meant playing smarter, longer, with more patience than seemed possible. Maya deserved that effort. The little girl forced to grieve a ghost deserved someone who wouldn't give up. I stood, stretched, started coffee. Time to begin the long fight. Time to be someone's Mrs. Jennings. The security job interview happened faster than expected. The building manager, a woman with tired eyes who'd clearly seen too many overnight guards come and go, barely glanced at my application before explaining the basics. Walk the floors every hour, check doors, watch monitors. The simplicity felt like mercy after everything else. 3 days into the job, working midnight to 8 a.m. shifts, I discovered something useful. The empty offices had printers, scanners, and most importantly, time. I started organizing Maya's evidence properly, creating indexed files with timestamps and context. Each video got a written summary. Each photo got cataloged. My phone buzzed during a patrol. An email from the legal aid lawyer with an attachment, a motion template for emergency custody. She'd reconsidered after reviewing the evidence I'd sent. Not full representation, but guidance. The catch was timing. File too early, and Katrina would escalate. Wait too long, and Maya might break completely. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While scanning Katrina's old Facebook posts for patterns, I found a comment from her sister, Catherine. Not supportive, not condemning, just careful words about family patterns and getting help. I remembered Catherine from childhood, older than Katrina, always keeping distance at family gatherings. I messaged Catherine through Facebook, keeping it simple. Concern for Maya, worried about history repeating. Her response came at 3 a.m. while I was doing rounds. She'd been waiting for someone to reach out, had her own memories, her own documentation. Their mother had done similar things to them. We met at a diner during my dinner break the next night. Catherine looked like Katrina, aged differently. Same features, but without the performative grief. She slid a folder across the table, photos from their childhood, letters their mother made them write to their grandfather who died before they were born. The parallels made my skin crawl. Catherine explained she'd tried intervening when Brandon died, recognizing the signs. Katrina had cut her off completely, poisoned the family against her, but she'd kept watching, documenting from afar. She had videos from family gatherings where Katrina's behavior crossed lines, screenshots of concerning posts dating back years. The most damning evidence was something I hadn't expected. Catherine had recorded phone conversations with Katrina over the years, legal in our state with one-party consent. In one recording from 6 months ago, Katrina admitted she sometimes believed Maya was Brandon reincarnated, that she needed Maya to carry his spirit because she couldn't let him go. I spent the next week combining our evidence while working my shifts. The security job paid less, but offered something valuable. Predictability. No drama, no family connections, just empty hallways and hourly patrols. My supervisor, an older man who'd worked nights for decades, appreciated reliability over everything else. During this time, I discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in Maya's phone videos was a voice memo app she'd been using. Hours of recordings, some dating back over a year. Katrina talking to Brandon's photos with Maya in the room, explaining how Maya needed to honor his presence by perfect behavior, threatening to increase the morning sessions if Maya showed too much happiness at school. One recording stood out. Katrina, unaware Maya was recording, admitted to someone on the phone that the morning crying wasn't about Brandon anymore. It was about control, about making sure Maya never left her like Sean had. The admission was clear, undeniable. The custody filing happened on a Thursday. The legal aid lawyer helped prepare the documents while I scraped together the filing fees. Emergency custody based on emotional abuse, supported by extensive documentation. The court clerk's expression shifted as she reviewed the evidence index. This wasn't a typical family dispute. Katrina got served the next day. Her Facebook explosion was immediate, but different than expected. Instead of public performance, she went silent for hours. Then came a single post about betrayal from within and sisters who never understood. Catherine had been named as a witness. The emergency hearing was set for the following week. I worked every shift possible, saving for lawyer consultations even though I had legal aid. The preparation consumed my non-working hours, organizing evidence, writing summaries, practicing what to say without sounding rehearsed. 3 days before the hearing, Marcus showed up at my work. Security cameras caught him trying to follow me into the building. My supervisor, reviewing the footage, banned him from the property without me having to explain. Sometimes silence spoke louder than words. The mediation attempt came first, court mandated before the hearing. I sat across from Katrina in a small room while a mediator tried to find middle ground. Katrina started controlled, talking about grief and healing. But when the mediator asked about the morning rituals, something cracked. She launched into an explanation about necessary morning exercises and how children needed to understand loss. The mediator's careful expression never changed, but her note-taking intensified. When Katrina described the letter writing as channeling Brandon's presence, the mediator asked for clarification. The more Katrina explained, the worse it sounded. She genuinely believed she was helping Maya by forcing daily grief, that without the rituals, Maya might forget Brandon existed. The mediator asked if Katrina understood why others might view this as harmful. Katrina's response, that others didn't understand a mother's love, sealed something. The hearing itself felt both endless and too quick. The judge, a woman who'd clearly seen too many custody battles, reviewed evidence methodically. Catherine testified first, describing their childhood patterns, how their mother had forced similar rituals for their grandfather, how Katrina had sworn she'd never do the same, then exceeded it. Catherine Catherine's testimony included something unexpected. Their mother had eventually gotten treatment, recognized the harm she'd caused. But by then, Katrina had internalized the behavior as normal, the cycle continuing despite everyone's efforts to break it. When they played Katrina's voice memos in court, her lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed them, noting their relevance to the child's welfare. Hearing Katrina's voice echo through the courtroom, talking about Maya carrying Brandon's spirit, shifted the atmosphere. The Guardian ad litem's report came next. They'd interviewed Maya multiple times, observed her interactions with both Katrina and me. Their recommendation was clear. Maya showed signs of significant emotional distress directly linked to the morning rituals and forced grief exercises. The school counselor testified about Maya's anxiety medication needs, how she'd noticed Maya's deterioration over months. Teachers provided statements about Maya falling asleep in class, starting at exactly 6:15 a.m. when the morning ritual would end. My testimony focused on facts, not emotions. The evidence spoke for itself. When asked what outcome I sought, I surprised everyone, including myself. Not permanent removal, but mandatory treatment for Katrina. Real grief counseling, not the performance she'd been doing. Maya needed a mother who could heal. The judge's decision came after a brief recess. Temporary custody to me, with conditions. Supervised visits for Katrina after completing initial psychiatric evaluation. Mandatory grief counseling with progress reports to the court. Family therapy once individual treatment showed progress. Katrina's breakdown in court was different than her usual performances. Quieter, more real. When the judge explained the requirements, Katrina asked repeatedly about the morning rituals. Could she at least say good morning to Brandon with Maya? The judge's gentle but firm no seemed to finally penetrate. The aftermath moved quickly. Maya's transfer to my custody happened within 48 hours. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a garbage bag of Brandon's photos Katrina had insisted she take. We spent the first evening in silence, neither of us quite believing the shift. The family fractures were immediate. Some relatives cut contact completely, choosing Katrina's narrative over court documents. Others reached out quietly, admitting they'd seen signs but hadn't known how to help. The division felt permanent but necessary. Setting up Maya's life required practical decisions. School transfer to be closer to my apartment. New therapist without Katrina's influence. Medication management transferred to a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma. Each step felt monumental and mundane simultaneously. The first morning Maya woke up past 5 a.m. She panicked. Muscle memory demanded she get up, perform the ritual. I found her sitting on the couch at 5:15, shaking. We sat together in silence until 6 a.m. passed. The next morning was easier. By the 4th day, she slept until her alarm at 6:30. Katrina's treatment began immediately. Her psychiatrist, court-appointed and experienced with grief disorders, sent regular updates to the judge. The initial sessions revealed depths of unprocessed trauma dating back to Brandon's death. Real work, not performance. My security job became permanent, with benefits after 90 days. The overnight schedule worked well with Maya's school hours. We developed routines that felt nothing like rituals. Dinner together when possible, homework at the kitchen table, normal life things. The supervised visits started after 6 weeks. 1 hour weekly at a neutral location with a social worker present. Katrina arrived early each time, following every rule precisely. The visits were awkward, but necessary. Maya needed to see her mother trying to change. 3 months in, Katrina's progress reports showed genuine improvement. The grief counseling had uncovered layers of guilt about Brandon's death that she'd buried under ritualized mourning. She'd started taking responsibility for the harm caused, though understanding would take longer. Catherine became a regular presence, helping navigate the family dynamics. She'd been through her own therapy years ago, dealing with their mother's impact. Her support felt like having an actual sister for the first time. The permanent custody hearing was scheduled for 6 months after the emergency order. By then, Maya was sleeping normally, her grades improving, anxiety managed with proper treatment. She joined the school's art club, made a few friends, started resembling a regular teenager. Katrina appeared different at the final hearing, calmer, more present. She'd gained weight, lost the hollow look that constant performance created. When asked about the morning rituals, she acknowledged they were harmful, born from unprocessed grief and fear of losing another child. The judge's final order reflected the progress. Permanent custody to me with increasing unsupervised visits as treatment continued. Katrina required to maintain therapy for at least 2 years. The possibility of shared custody in the future if progress continued. Some family members slowly returned, seeing the changes in both Katrina and Maya. Others remained distant, the divide too deep to bridge. We learned to accept both responses. 6 months after that night, Maya appeared at my door. She slept peacefully past 5 a.m. every morning. Katrina attended grief support groups religiously, processing Brandon's death properly after 20 years. The morning crying had ended, replaced by genuine healing work. Maya kept one photo of Brandon in her room. Her choice, not an obligation. We'd built something that looked like a life, honoring the brother I'd never met by protecting the sister who'd almost been lost to ritualized grief. Thanks for reading this story with me. I hope you have a wonderful day. See you next time.